بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الإمام البيقوني رحمه الله تعالى: والمسند المتصل الإسناد من راويه حتى المصطفى ولم يبن، وما بسمع كل راوي يتصل إسناده للمصطفى فالمتصل مسلسل قل ما على وصف أتى، مثل أما والله أنباني الفتى، كذاك قد حدثني قائما أو بعد أن حدثني تبسما، عزيز مروي اثنين أو ثلاثة، مشهور مروي فوق ما ثلاثة، معنعن كعن سعيد عن كرم، ومبهم ما فيه راو لم يسم، وكل ما قلت رجاله على، وضده ذاك الذي قد نزلا، وما أضفته إلى الأصحاب من قول وفعل فهو موقوف زك.
طيب، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. The eighth line starts off with وَالْمُسْنَدُ الْمُتَّصِلُ الْإِسْنَادِ مِنْ رَاوِيهِ حَتَّى الْمُصْطَفَى وَلَمْ يَبِنْ. Eighth line. Another term that the muhaddithun use is al-musnad al-muttasil. Al-musnad al-muttasil or al-musnad. Alright, al-musnad al-muttasil al-isnad min rawihi hatta al-mustafa wa lam yabin. Another term is al-musnad. This term al-musnad, what does it mean? It means two things, just two things. It has to have two things, and these two things we already mentioned them. Alright? But when you combine these two matters, they are known as al-musnad. Alright? Al-musnad. The first one is al-ittisal. The first one is al-ittisal. That the chain has to be connected. The chain has to be what? Has to be connected. And the second one is al-marfu'. That it has to be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. When these two matters come together, they are collectively known as al-musnad, according to a number of scholars, such as Al-Hakim An-Nisaburi rahimahullah. Al-Hakim that you guys read about last week, and some of his opinions. Al-Hakim, he passed away in the year 405 after the Hijrah. Abu Abdullah An-Nisaburi. And Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani, Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani, the 9th century scholar, who passed away in the year 852. And other scholars, they say that this is what Al-Musnad means. Al-Musnad means. طبعا, some of the scholars, they say otherwise. Some of them say that Al-Musnad means Al-Muttasil. Any chain that is connected is known as Al-Musnad. Whether it's attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, whether a companion said it, whether a tabi'i said it, as long as it's connected and it goes back to the person who said it, then this is Al-Musnad. And others, they say no, Al-Musnad is anything attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, whether it's connected or not. Whether it's what? Connected or not. But the correct opinion is that what? It's anything that is connected and anything that is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. So we have three opinions regarding the term Al-Musnad. The first is that Al-Musnad has two conditions. The first is that it is connected, and second, it is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. Second opinion is that it is connected, whether the Prophet ﷺ said it, whether a companion of the Prophet ﷺ said it, or whether a tabi'i said it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who said it. It's all about whether it's connected or not. And the third opinion is the opposite of that. The Prophet ﷺ has to have said it, or it's attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, but it doesn't have to be connected. If it's connected or not, that doesn't matter. Okay? And this last opinion is an opinion that is held by one scholar that I know of, and that is Ibn Abdul Barr. Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah. He's a scholar who passed away in the year 463. He was known as Hafidh al-Maghrib. He was the Hafidh of al-Maghrib, Hafidh of the Western Hemisphere of Islam. There was another scholar by the name of Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, who was also another Hafidh, another Muhaddith. He was known as Hafidh al-Mashriq, the scholar of Hadith in the Eastern Hemisphere. And they both passed away in the same year, 463. Okay? Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi was from Baghdad, and Ibn Abdul Barr was from where? From Spain. Ibn Abdul Barr has many books. From his famous works is At-Tamheed. Alright, لما في الموطأ من المعاني والأسانيد. At-Tamheed is a magnum opus printed in more than 20 volumes. Okay, he explains the book Muwatta al-Imam Malik from a hadithi aspect, and he also explains it in another book called Al-Istithkar, and he explained it from this book, يعني Al-Istithkar, from a fiqh aspect. Yani he explained the book Muwatta al-Imam Malik from two different aspects, one from a hadithi aspect and one from a fiqhi aspect. Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, he has opinion that Al-Musnad means anything that is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the only scholar that I know of, Allah alam. There could be others, but he's famously known as. So if you look in his book At-Tamheed or in his book Al-Istithkar, he also has another book that I'm not sure it's translated, and for those of you guys that already know Arabic, maybe you could read it. He has a book called Jami' Bayan al-Ilmi wa Fadlih. Alright, Jami' Bayan al-Ilmi wa Fadlih, talking about the virtues of knowledge. Excellent book, printed in one volume. Very good one. Very good one. Inshallah, maybe one time we could go through it really quickly, or read some excerpts from it. A great book. If you see in any of his books the term Al-Musnad, we have to know that he means what? Anything that is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's connected in terms of its chain. Alright? والمسند المتصل الإسناد من راويه حتى المصطفى ولم يبن. Then in the 9th line he says وما بسمع كل راو يتصل إسناده للمصطفى فالمتصل. Okay, now he talks about Al-Musnad, Al-Muttasil. Al-Muttasil is another term that the Muhaddithun use, which means any chain that is connected. And we've already discussed this when we talked about the 5 conditions of a authentic hadith, of a sahih hadith. The first condition is that it has to be connected. If the chain is connected, this is known as Al-Muttasil. This is known as Al-Muttasil. طيب. The 10th line is مسلسل قل ما على وصف أتى مثل أما والله أنباني الفتى كذاك قد حدثني قائما أو بعد أن حدثني تبسما. These 2 lines are connected to each other. Musalsal, that's another term. Musalsal is another term that the muhaddithun use. What is al-musalsal? Al-musalsal is, we can talk about different types of musalsal so you guys can understand. Musalsal basically means when the narrator, the first narrator, alright, narrates something to the one after him. Alright? He narrates it in a way in which the narrator takes it from him the same way. And the one after him takes it from the same way. And the one after him takes it from the same way. All the way to where it ends, whether it's in a book or whether it continues to this day. So for example, بالمثال يتضح المقال. With an example, it makes it much clearer. We have something called al-musalsal al-qawli. There's a type called al-musalsal al-qawli. You say, for example, there's a famous hadith collected by Abu Dawood in his As-Sunan, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. That the ones who have mercy, Allah will give them mercy. Alright? So have mercy to the people on earth, and the one in the heavens will have mercy on you. Okay. For the first part of the chain, this does not exist. But from Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Sufyan ibn Uyayna is a scholar from the late 2nd century. Till this day, he narrates this hadith, and he said, his student narrates this hadith. His student, this is the first hadith he heard from Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Okay? Then, when he told his student, he told him, this is the first hadith that I heard from Sufyan ibn Uyayna's student, until today. So everybody in the chain is saying, this is the first hadith that I heard from this person. This is a whole chain going back for almost 1200 years. This is the first hadith that I heard from this sheikh. And this is the first hadith that I heard from this sheikh. And this is the first hadith that I heard from this sheikh. All the way back to Sufyan ibn Uyayna's time. You see this? This is known as al-musalsal. Okay? And we had the opportunity, lillahi alhamd, to hear this from some of our mashayikh. some of my mashayikh, the first hadith that I ever heard from him was this hadith. And I wish we had the opportunity to do that for you guys. But maybe some of you guys are here for the first time, or this is the first hadith that you guys hear from me. If that's the case, then I tell you guys, I can give you guys the entire sanad, inshallah ta'ala. But the point is, this is musalsal. This is something that's been carried on in every narration. Okay? Another type is al-musalsal al-fi'li, is an action. Alright? So for example, the narrator, when he was saying this hadith, he stands up. He stands up. He what? Stands up. The one after him stands up as well. The third one stands up all the way till this day, or wherever the book ends, and in whichever book it's mentioned. Okay? This is known as al-musalsal al-fi'li. Here he gives an example. He says, "An haddathani tabassama." Whenever he gives the hadith, says the hadith, he gives a smile. At the end of the hadith, he smiles. The one after him smiles. The one after him smiles. This is known as al-musalsal. There's another type known as musalsal al-a'immah. Musalsal al-a'immah, or musalsal al-huffaz, or musalsal al-fuqaha, whatever you want to call it. When you have heavyweights, all pros, narrating from each other. You got heavyweights. You have a scholar who narrates from a scholar, who narrates from a scholar, who narrates from a scholar. That's like, you can't play with that. That's serious right there. Okay? And I'll give you guys an example. This is the only hadith you'll find, alright, with three of the four imams. Okay? The four imams, the four schools of thought, in a hadith in which one narrates from the other. Okay? This hadith is collected by Imam Ahmad in his Al-Musnad. Okay? In which Imam Ahmad narrates from Imam Al-Shafi'i, and Al-Shafi'i narrates from Imam Malik, and Imam Malik narrates from Nafi'. Nafi' is one of the biggest tabi'een, one of the biggest scholars of the tabi'een. And Nafi' narrates from Ibn Umar. You guys all know who Ibn Umar is, radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. And he narrates from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a whole chain, right? Okay, this chain, the scholars, they call it al-musalsal al-dhahabi, the golden chain. Like heavyweight after heavyweight. You have Imam Ahmad who narrates from Shafi'i, who narrates from Malik. This is the only hadith that you find in Musnad Imam Ahmad. Musnad Imam Ahmad has more than 30,000 ahadith. 30,000 ahadith. This is the only chain you'll find. Alright? That the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that has to do with mu'amalat. Right? لا يبيع بعضكم على بعض. إلى آخر الحديث. That one of you should not buy when another person is buying. You shouldn't buy from him. Okay? Or for example, you have a scenario in which you see a customer and at a place, and he's about to have a transaction done, and you come in right in the middle of the transaction and you try to negotiate and get that, and you get a better deal. You shouldn't do that, because that creates animosity between the Muslims, right? Somebody's already finalizing a transaction, let them finish, or wait till they finish. Don't just come in and jump in and try to, you know what I mean? Unless it's an auction. An auction is a whole different story. طيب. Al-Muhim, this is not a fiqh class. Let's go back to hadith. Musalsal al-imma al-hufaz. If you see scholars, narrating one from another, this is known as musalsal al-imma wal-hufaz. And there are many other examples. That's just one example. طيب. Al-musalsal, what is its benefits? Are there any benefits from it? Yes, there are benefits from it. The same benefit that we mentioned for asbab al-nuzul, the reasons for revelation, right? Shows you how the muhaddithin, the scholars, are so what? They mention every single little detail. The fact that he stood up, the fact that he even smiled, like subhanallah, how you can't even get more detail than that. It shows you, forget about even the hadith that are being transmitted, even the way he's transmitting the hadith is mentioned in the hadith. He smiled right after. He said this little thing right after. All right. He was sitting down. He was laying down. Whatever it may be, shows you how detailed they can get, and it shows you how much they preserved the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, just like the Quran was preserved. Alright? It also, one of the things that we can benefit is that when you have a musalsal like the aforementioned one of scholars, one scholar after the other, it shows you the strength of that hadith. Yani when you have a narrator who's a thiqah, who's a reliable narrator, that reliable narrator is not like a scholar. Abadan. A scholar is higher. What if you have the entire chain of scholars? Entire chain. It shows you the strength of that chain. Alright? And Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he said that if we see a sanad in which majority of the narrators are scholars, then it can be classified as a mutawatir hadith. It can be classified as a what? A mutawatir hadith. What is a mutawatir hadith? Inshallah, it will come later on today. Or actually, it's going to come in our next line. In our next line, if you can read for us the next line.
عزيز مروي اثنين أو ثلاثة مشهور مروي فوق ما ثلاثة.
طيب. Before we talk about this slide, we must understand Al-Mutawatir and Al-Ahad. These two types of hadith. Okay, everybody write this down. Al-Mutawatir and Al-Ahad, because this is not mentioned in the book. Alright? And we have to have this little introduction to understand Al-Aziz and Al-Mashhur, the two terms mentioned in this line. We have to understand what is Al-Mutawatir and what is Al-Ahad. Okay. What is a Mutawatir hadith? A Mutawatir hadith is a hadith in which ما رواه جمع, in which a number of people narrate this hadith, يستحيل العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب, that it becomes impossible for all of these people to agree on something. Yani all of these people, they agree on something, but it's impossible for it to be a lie. Okay? So, what does this mean? This means that this hadith, we have to believe it in certainty. We have to believe that it's a hadith, that we certainly believe that the Prophet ﷺ said it, because it's so popular. Okay? It's so popular. Now, there are some ahadith which can be disputed. Can we certainly believe that the Prophet ﷺ said it or not? But mutawatir ahadith, we have to certainly believe that they are from the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, or the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, or the approvals, whatever it may be. So, for example, alright, I'll give you guys an example of a mutawatir hadith. Alright, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawa maq'adahu minan nar." That whoever lies upon me, then let him reserve his seat in hellfire. This is a hadith the scholars, they say, is mutawatir. More than 80 of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ narrated this hadith. Widely popular. You go to the east, you go to the west, you go north, you go south, you find this hadith everywhere. Alright, before hadiths were in books, obviously. Alright, this hadith is mutawatir. We have to certainly believe that this is from the statements of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? Now, how do we determine this? Some of you guys may be wondering. Is it determined by a number? Like, if you get to the certain number of people narrated, then it becomes mutawatir? Na'am, some scholars, they've said that you can determine it using a number. Some of them, they said you have to have 500 narrators. Some of them, they said 313. Some of them, they said 1,400. And some other numbers. Okay? But the correct opinion is that we cannot use a number to determine this. It's not based off numbers. It's just based upon popularity. That it gets to a level in which it becomes impossible for it to be a lie. There's no way all of these people from so many different countries, so many different backgrounds can agree on the same statement. Alright? And they give a nice example all the time. They say, for example, China. Have any of you guys been to China? They always use China for some reason. I don't know why. But they always use this example. China. Have any of you guys been to China? No. Have you ever seen it? No. How do you know that China exists? How do you know that China exists? Internet. But internet is not something that you see. You literally see with your 5 senses. We believe that China exists. Why? Because it's impossible for all of these people to agree on what? On that China's, there's no way the whole world can agree that China is what? That's an example that they always give. The same thing applies here. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, so many people narrated it. There's no way all of these people can agree that it's a lie. Another example is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ used to raise his hands when he used to make dua. Prophet ﷺ used to raise his hands when he used to make dua. This is an example of a mutawatir hadith. Alright? It's more than 200 times in the sunnah. We find more than 200 times in the sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ used to raise his hands during dua. Okay? That's mutawatir as well. Alright? So mutawatir is a whole, it can be a whole lecture in itself. But obviously this is a beginning text, we don't want to go too deep into it. But just understand the concept of mutawatir. So popular that it's impossible for it to be a lie, and we have to certainly believe in it. Okay. The opposite of al-mutawatir is al-ahad. Ahad is not as popular. It's not as popular. And it can be, we don't have to believe that it's certainly from the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Ahad is anything that is not mutawatir. If it's not mutawatir, it is ahad. And ahad is classified into 3 types. There are 3 types of ahad hadith. Okay? So you have it, look at it as like a tree. You have mutawatir on one side, and you have ahad. And then ahad is divided into 3. Ahad is divided into 3. Okay. The first type is known as al-mashhur. First type is known as al-mashhur, in which he mentions here. And al-mashhur is anything that is narrated by 3 people or more in any tabaqa, in any level of the chain. 3 people or more. The least number of people you find in the chain is 3. This is known as al-mashhur. Okay? And al-mashhur in the Arabic language, linguistically, it means something that is popular. Something that is popular. But that's not what we mean here. This hadith, al-mashhur, is not as popular as mutawatir, but it's less than that. So at least 3 or more people narrated. This is known as al-mashhur. The scholars, they consider it al-mashhur. Alright? The second type is al-aziz. The second type is what? Al-aziz. Al-aziz, 2 people narrated. 2 people narrated. Okay? And this is the definition of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. Ibn Hajar, he says that 2 people, when they narrate in any chain, in any level of the chain, when 2 people narrate it, this is known as al-aziz. This is known as al-aziz. So you have 3 people, al-mashhur, 2 people is al-aziz. Okay? Some of the scholars, they may refer to al-aziz as a low number. They don't restrict it to a number. Right? Just like mutawatir. They don't restrict it to a number. They just say, when not a lot of people narrate this hadith, this is known as al-aziz. When a lot of people narrate it, it's known as al-mashhur. When too many people narrate it, it's known as mutawatir. See what I'm trying to say? Some of them, they don't put numbers. And some of them, they actually do put numbers. طيب. But just know that mashhur is 3 or more, and al-aziz is 2. And then the third type is al-gharib. The third type is al-gharib. Al-gharib is when one person narrates in any level of chain, like the example that we gave last week, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith Umar ibn al-Khattab, mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى دُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. This hadith of Prophet ﷺ, when we mentioned the chain of narration, there is one narrator. Only one person heard it from the Prophet ﷺ. And that person was who? Umar. And from Umar, one person narrated it. And that person was who? Alqamah. And from Alqamah, only one person narrated it. And that person was who? Muhammad ibn Ibrahim at-Taymi. And from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim at-Taymi, only one person heard it. And that was Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari. And the funny thing is, all three of these people, they're all tabi'een. Yani they're all from the tabi'een. Okay, they're all from the same generation. Then Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, he narrated it to the whole world. They say more than 100 people narrated from Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari. But this hadith, according to many scholars, is considered al-gharib because it has one chain. It has one person in a level, in any level. That is al-gharib. So you have mutawatir, a hadith that are widely popular, and then you have ahad. And ahad are three types: al-aziz, al-gharib, and al-mashhur. Okay? And what is the ruling of of ahadith or ahad? Hadith or ahad? Do we have to believe in them certainly? Just like al-mutawatir or not? There are three different opinions according to the scholars. Okay? Majority, the overwhelming majority, they say that no, we don't have to believe that they are certain. But we say that most likely the Prophet ﷺ said it, or the most likely the Prophet ﷺ did it. They call it al-dhann, right? They say 80, 90%, whatever you guys want to call it, but you can't believe it 100%. This is according to the majority. Some of them, they say you have to believe it. You have to believe it 100%. And the third opinion looks to be a balanced opinion. Alright? And it is the opinion of some of the muhaqqiqeen, some of the great scholars like Ibn Hajar and others. They say that the asl is that we don't have to believe in its certainty. But if it has some other factors to it, right? Other factors to it, then it can become mutawatir. They can become, we can believe it certainly. So for example, from the things that they say is al-musalsal. Al-musalsal bil-a'imma. When the chain is mostly scholars, then we can believe in it certainly. Just like al-mutawatir. Even if it's a ahad hadith. Even if it's a hadith that is ahad. If it's a hadith that is collected by Bukhari and Muslim, then we can believe in it certainly. Then we can believe it what? In it certainly. And qara'in like this and other factors like this. If some of these factors are added to it, then it can become certain. But if these factors are not present and it's just a normal hadith with a different chain, then it's what? Then it's we don't have to believe in it certainly. We just believe in it that it's something that most likely the Prophet ﷺ said. Alright? Let's take the next line. Okay, now in this line he mentions two more terminologies of hadith. مُعَنْعَنٌ كَعَنْ سَعِيدٍ عَنْ كَرَمْ وَمُبْهَمٌ مَا فِيهِ رَاوٍ لَمْ يُسَمْ. The first one is al-mu'an'an. What is al-mu'an'an? Now, we have to understand that the muhaddithun, when they say mu'an'an, they mean one thing. Okay? The mu'allif here, everybody pay attention to this, very important. The author here, he defines mu'an'an in a way that it contrasts to what most of the muhaddithin define it. Al-mu'an'an, according to the author, is whenever you find in a hadith an. Whenever you find in a hadith an, this is known as al-mu'an'an. According to the author, mu'an'anun ka'an sa'idin an karam. And he gives an example, an sa'id an karam. Whenever you open up a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, if you find an, then this is what? Mu'an'an. But this is not what the majority of muhaddithin mean. Majority of muhaddithin, what they mean by al-mu'an'an is when somebody in a chain, for example, you have somebody who narrated it for somebody. This person narrated it from this person. Okay? These two people actually meet? Or do they live in the same city? Or is it possible for them to meet? Is it a condition for them to meet? Do we have to know that they met? Or is it enough that we know that it's most likely they met? Do we actually have to know? Difference of opinion between the scholars. This is what they mean by mu'an'an. Okay? when somebody narrates from somebody and he uses the word an, and there's a chance that he might have not met it, yani met that person, this is known as a mu'an'an. So let me make it clear. Okay, Al-Imam Al-Bukhari and Ali ibn al-Madini rahimahumullah, these two great scholars, and some others, they say that if this person, these two people, we have to know that they met at least once. We have to know that they meet at least once. This is a condition. Otherwise, we're rejecting the hadith. This is the opinion of Imam Bukhari and Imam Ali ibn Madini. That's what they say. And if this person uses the word an, then we have to know that they met at least once. What does the word an mean? An means something that you heard, but there's a chance that you didn't hear it from directly. Something that somebody said, but there's a chance that you didn't hear from that person directly. You guys understand what I'm trying to say? So for example, right, you guys hear something today and you relate it to somebody else. Okay? That somebody else, you know what he says about me? He says an Abdullah. But that person never heard it from me. He heard it through a what? Through a mediary. But he never actually mentions an, doesn't say that you heard from the person directly. So you're not lying. When the person does that, he's not lying. Okay? But it shows, it kind of shows, it's kind of a white lie, if you want to call it. It's not a white lie, but kind of like a white lie. Right? He says an. It's like saying, yo, that person said such. But then it shows that you might have heard it from him. So this is what an means. This is what an means. Okay? So when you have this person who narrates from this person, okay? If this person uses the word an, then we have to know that at least they met one time, according to Imam Bukhari and Ali ibn Madini rahimahumullah, and it is the opinion of Ibn Hajar. Okay, now we have another opinion held by Imam Muslim. Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he says no, that's too much. Like if we make this a condition, then a lot of a hadith will be taken out. We can't do that. But what we say is there's a big chance that they met. We don't have to know that every single narrator met the other narrator. Okay? But there's a big chance that they met. So for example, they live in the same city. Most likely they met, right? He's a student of knowledge. He's a big sheikh. He probably met him, most likely. Okay? For example, they met each other in Hajj, or they went to Hajj the same year, for example. Just for example. Most likely they met. But we don't have to know that they actually met, because to know that requires a lot of work. So if the person says, Sami'tu, I've heard, or Haddathana, or Akhbarana, I've heard directly, then it's one of the two. Either he's telling the truth and his hadith is accepted, or he's not telling the truth and his hadith is not accepted. We're talking about when he uses the word what? An. Because an doesn't mean that you heard from it directly, but it shows that you kind of heard it from directly. You understand? So it's one of those words, an and ana as well. Ana. If you use the word an, it goes the same thing. So it doesn't just mean mu'an'an. That's not what it just means. Mu'an'an doesn't mean that you use the word an. Because if you open up any hadith book right now, you open up Sahih Bukhari, you open up Sahih Muslim, any hadith book, you find an almost in every chain, or most of the chains. That's not what they mean by mu'an'an. They mean when a narrator, who we don't know if they actually met, he used the word an. What is the ruling of that? Okay, and we already mentioned the ruling, the two opinions of the scholars, and the differences between them. Alright, and Al-Mubham, inshallah, will cover that bi'idhnillah azza wa jal next week. And Salah has come upon us. I believe Salat al-Maghrib has come upon us right now. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Inshallah, we'll come back after Maghrib, and we'll leave it at that. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.